Hello, welcome, fathers and sons. For those who do not know me, I am the alumni director here, Brian Hyde, class of '86. I am the second of three generations of Lancers to come through here. My father was a grad in '66. For all those guys that are thinking the math teacher, that was my uncle, Fred. So those two guys and my other uncle graduated in '72. A bunch of Hyde-Orns came through in the mid-'80s, '90s, and then my son graduated from here in '21. So to stand in front of you is an honor and a privilege because this place gives a lot of opportunities to these young men here, and we appreciate fathers you sending them here. The brotherhood thing is real. It's not just a word. It's going to be hugely shown to you in this next speech. I'll break up a little bit because Coach Doerger and I, we did a lot together here at school. Some of you guys in the audience I know had him for class or as a coach. You know the type of man he was, how deeply he was devoted to his faith and to LaSalle High School. He used to give this talk to all the Freshman Day of Renewals probably for about 10 plus years. Took a lot of pride in it. Talked about the relationships of father-sons and being a Lancer. And unfortunately, as Coach Werman just mentioned, he passed away a couple Decembers ago. And we miss him dearly. But as we moved on, and Luke was here while his dad, and he's going to tell a little bit more about that story, he felt honored and called to come back and give the same speech about his perspective as father and son. So without further ado, Luke Doerger.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
First thing I want to do is I want to thank Brian Hyde-Orn, Chris Winiarski, and Jeff Weirman for giving me this opportunity to be here in front of you today. It's an honor to fill in the shoes that my dad once filled in for this retreat in his many years here at LaSalle. So a little bit about my dad. He held many titles in his life. He was a LaSalle Lancer, he was a Notre Dame Fighting Irishman, and he was known by many young men as Mr. Doerger. Many of those same young men also called him Coach Doerger. And he was even blessed enough to become Pawpaw later in his life. To me, he was Dad. As for me, Brian said, my name is Luke Doerger. I'm a husband, an uncle, a brother, to name a few of my titles. But all of those titles and any others that I hold are influenced heavily by my experience as a son of Coach Tom Doerger. During my childhood, there were a number of lessons instilled within me that I hope to never lose hold of. From very early on, my parents ensured that I would be well practiced in some basic building blocks for life. Pleases, thank yous, yes sirs, and no sirs were all that demanded of me. It was made very clear to me early on that the courtesy of simple manners would go a long way and make a difference. As I got older and observed my parents more, I recognized that it wasn't the manners that mattered. It wasn't the exact words used. It was the respect with which they were delivered. The manners themselves are a nice gesture on their own, but to show genuine gratitude and respect towards another person, that's what people really feel. That's what really matters, and that's what makes the difference. I also learned early on the importance of integrity. For those of you who don't know that word or are unfamiliar, basically means that what you do when no one is watching speaks a lot louder than what you do in front of a crowd. So be a man of your word, keep your promises and your oaths to others and especially to yourself. And be the man that you say that you are going to be. Winners never quit. Notice that this doesn't say winners never fail. Winners will fail and lose quite often, actually. But They get back up, and they keep moving forward. They don't throw in the towel. They don't give up. They don't quit. Winners are not defined by their successes and their failures. They're defined by their drive to get up every time they fall. I also learned early on the importance of faith, family, and education. I was taught that these are pillars of your life that you need to be able to rely on. You need to be able to rely on your education. This goes for your formal schooling, as well as those experiences in real life that you take on and learn from. You need to be able to rely on your family and your chosen loved ones, and they need to be able to rely on you. And you need to be able to rely on your faith in God. This world can present you with infinite situations and circumstances that you may or may not want to find yourself in. In each and every one of those situations, God plays the role of either the shining sun, making even brighter the day that is before us, or he is the lone lamp which we rely on to help guide us through the darkness of the night. Always do, always will. I remember very early in my childhood, I frequently had nightmares that I couldn't wake from. And every night I would ask my parents to come in and check on me later that night to make sure that I was safe in the sleep. Their response, always do, always will. As I got older and the nightmares less frequent, I didn't ask them to check on me anymore. I was fine. So I thought. But the saying stuck and found its place in my parents' words before closing the door at night. I love you. Always do, always will. Not only did my dad want to tell me in the moment that he loved me, but he wanted to make sure that I knew he always would. And I still do. Always leave a place better than you found it. I remember this one specifically being brought up anytime I was a guest in someone's home. At the end of your stay, don't just pick up your things and leave. Clean up after yourself. Show thanks for the hospitality that you were shown. And as I got older, this lesson left me with a much deeper message as I learned more about it. It wasn't just cleaning up your trash or neatly returning anything that was lended to you. It was about your energy. It was about the impact you make on a room and those who join you in it. It was a lesson about what we are meant to do on this earth. We are meant to make this world a better place with the time we are afforded to have while we're on it. By the time I got to high school, it was my first opportunity to truly follow my dad's footsteps. From the moment I was born, it wasn't a question in anyone's mind. I was going to be a Lancer. Going into my freshman year, I earned the opportunity to play for the varsity football team. I was called into the head coach's office at the time, the week before school started, and I was told that I would be moving up and no longer playing with the freshmen. I was ecstatic. I'd made it a goal since the year prior when a very hardworking individual who played defensive line set the precedent that one could do it. The head coach said to me, I wanted to do this in the summer, but our offensive line coach wanted you to earn this and prove that you could handle the challenge. For those of you who don't know, that offensive line coach was my father, Tom Doerger. He had worked at LaSalle for roughly 30 years by that point and had coached football every year since he had started. He also served as head of guidance after stepping away from his role as dean of discipline years prior. From that moment, I knew I was going to have something to prove on that field. Not just to my coaches, not just to my dad, but to myself. I had to prove that I was going to earn that starting position, and I wanted to earn it every single day. And Dad certainly made sure that I did. Following week was a massive challenge. Week 1. Felt like I was getting a beating every practice, but I fought and worked my way through. I remember after the first practice, I was walking with my coach to get into the car to go home. Both of us were very quiet. As soon as we get into the car and make our way onto North Bend Road, without skipping a beat, he goes, "So how was practice?" I was speechless. I didn't know what to say there. Good. I had to question if my dad was losing his mind at that point. He prodded further, asking about drills, how was team period, stuff like that. And I was thoroughly confused by the end of the conversation by the time we got home. Next day after practice, it was the same thing. How was practice? I said it was okay. I thought through, every period that we had, trying to think about the good, the bad, the indifferent, trying to do it almost like a film review, because I thought that's what he was going for. But his responses made me feel like that wasn't the case. He was listening. He was just genuinely curious about my day and how practice went. Next day was the same deal. Get in the car after practice, and he goes, "So how was practice?" By this point, I figured I was pretty confident on what he was going for here. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, Dad, practice was all right, but my O-line coach is a jerk." Much like you all here, my dad started cracking up laughing. He goes, "Is that right?" I go, "Yeah, he is." And as my dad would say whenever he would tell this story after that, that was the moment he knew we were going to be all right. I may have had to call him every day coach on that field, but at the end of every day, he was still my dad. And he wanted to make sure that I knew that. Going into the fall of my freshman year, my nephew would be turning 2, and he would be keen to watch my every move. He wanted to make sure that he saw everything that Uncle Luke said or did and how he did it. And my dad would remind me of this every single day. And he did so probably to keep me on my best behavior and make sure I was staying out of trouble. But I wanted to make sure that if he was going to look up to me, as well as my 3 other nieces and nephews that I had by the time I was a senior in high school, I wanted to give them the best example that I could. I wasn't perfect, but I wanted to be the best version of me that I could be for them. The younger of my 2 nephews, his name is Charlie, he was diagnosed in utero with a congenital issue. It would require surgery 10 days after he was born, and it severely decreased his chance of living. Charlie was born spring of my sophomore year, and he fought his way through surgery and beyond. Charlie would go home in the weeks following, and he would continue to fight through his complications having to do with his diagnosis, as well as other issues like scoliosis. Fighting all of this, Charlie still managed to smile through it all. I wanted to fight for Charlie. I couldn't help him any more than he was being helped already, but I wanted to fight for him all the same. So, every game that following season, I would tape up my wrists, and on my left wrist I would write, "For Charlie." I couldn't help Charlie heal, but I could still play for him. I could still work hard on that field to make him proud. One day I'd be blessed enough to see him taped up on his wrist as I went into my last game my senior year, and it said, "For Luke." Anyone who had the blessing of being under the tutelage of Tom Doerger, especially on the football field, has probably heard these words more times than they can count: attitude and effort. Those 2 ideas are 2 sides to the same coin. My dad would remind his offensive linemen, as well as anyone else on the team, and whomever he just had enough time with, that those 2 things were the only 2 things you could control in your life: your attitude and your effort. So long as you live and work with a proper attitude and genuine intention, you would learn from your experience, no matter what the outcome was. And so long as you gave your full effort, you could be proud of what you had done, no matter the outcome. Soon thereafter, I had the opportunity to play football for the University of Toledo on scholarship, as well as working towards a degree in mechanical engineering. Dad made it very clear to me what the next few years were about. I had not committed to play for Toledo football. I had committed to graduating from the University of Toledo with my degree. Football was just a means for me to achieve and to pay for my degree. That was the very thing that his father told him as he went into his freshman year at Notre Dame. In late fall of 2018, Dad was diagnosed with something called PSC. It's a rare disorder with complications that include high probability of cancer around his internal organs and the absolute need for a liver transplant. My parents talked me through this and explained the whole plan. Dad would start chemo and radiation in the spring, and it would continue on through the summer into the early fall. During this time, he would be placed on a waiting list for a life-saving liver transplant when he had finally finished his treatments. I was visiting home just before the fall camp in 2019. Around this time, Dad was about 4 weeks out from the end of his treatments, and I was going into my first season, as I would find out, starting. It was the final stretch for both of us. While I was home, I got a call from my offensive line coach, and he told me that our starting center had torn his ACL while at home, and I really needed to work on my snaps. So it was my turn to step up. I told my dad what I had just heard on the phone, and before I could even finish telling him, he had a football in his hand, and he was headed out our back door to the backyard. For those of you who don't know, my dad, as I alluded to, played for the University of Notre Dame on the offensive line, and he himself played center. He put me through every snapping drill at center that he knew, and he made sure that I knew exactly what I needed to work on going into that season. So, week 1 rolls around in the season, and we are playing University of Kentucky in Lexington. It was at least 100 degrees in the stands, and I could have sworn it was 130 on that field. Disregarding all of that, and the fact that he had just finished his last chemo and radiation treatments in the week prior, Tom Doerger was in the stands cheering just as loud as ever. That was one of my favorite games at Toledo. It wasn't because of how the game went. We played well. We lost. But I love this game because my dad got to see his son start at the same position that he played in college. And also because of what came next shortly after. The Monday following that UK game, I get a call from home, and Dad was going to get his liver. Transplant doctor had called him and told him to get in the car immediately to come in for surgery. As I'm hearing this from my mom, I'm grabbing my keys to head out the door. I'm headed home. And my dad very quickly jumped in, and he said, "I'll be fine. Stay with your team. They need you, and you have a responsibility to them." He reassured me that everything would be fine, and that he was in good hands. Not only was he in good hands, but as we would come to find out, he would recover quicker and be on his feet sooner than anyone the doctors had ever seen. He was sent home sooner than expected, and he was in incredible health. Once again, my father proved to me that he was Superman. Following his surgery, he started saying something that sounded like one of his old coach's sayings, but this one was new. I didn't recognize it. He kept saying 3 more. And before long, Dad clued me into what the message behind that was. In all that you do in life, always give 3 more. Take 3 more steps. Whether athletic or academic, personal or professional, go 3 steps further than what you might think is necessary. As my dad was recovering from his surgery in the hospital, one of his many exercises he had to do for rehab was he would take a flight of stairs. At first, it was difficult for him. But anytime he felt like stopping, he thought to himself, I can do 3 more steps. Just 3 more. And after those 3, he would pause and he'd think the same thing. I can do 3 more. Soon enough, Dad would be at the top of the steps, ready to head back down and back up again. During his recovery, once he was finally home, my dad did social distancing before it was cool. He would have to wear a mask and gloves wherever he went because of the heavy immunosuppressants that he had to be on so that his body would accept his liver. After recovering and healing enough, my dad was finally allowed to take the long car ride up to Toledo to watch his son play against BYU. He would be sitting in the coach's room with a perfect view of for an offensive line coach. He would be head on to the entire offensive line, seeing them tackle to tackle, and he would be nose to nose with the center. I knew this was a big game. It was a big game for us because of the opponent and everything, but I knew what that game meant to my dad. I would be facing a D lineman who felt nearly twice my size, and he was a challenge to block, to say the least. Within the first few plays of that game, I tore a ligament in my right thumb, my snapping hand. I had a choice to make, but at that point in my head, it wasn't really a choice. I went over and had the trainers take me up and do all but give me a cast on my hand, and I started snapping on the sidelines. I needed to make sure I was good to get back in there. It was gonna hurt, but I couldn't let that stop me. I would continue out on the field, wincing with every snap, every block. But before every play, I would look up from the ball and see my dad, and I would think, I got 3 more snaps. And after enough times of saying that to myself in my head, I would be able to look up at my dad one last time before we scored the game-winning touchdown in double overtime. I was exhausted. I collapsed to my knees, laughing, crying, all but passing out, really. But I knew, as I was going through that I could make it to the end and come out on top, because my dad had shown me that he could do it. After college, I moved back home to start my professional and adult life. I would soon start up my career as an engineer, and I would get engaged to my now wife. Going into that proposal, I wanted to add a more personal touch to it. I wanted to create my own ring box for the proposal, and I wanted my dad to help me. Growing up, I remember loving the opportunity to help my dad with a project. Whether it was working on re-roofing our shed when I was in college, or whether I was just hammering spare nails into a 2x4 when I was 4 years old and just letting my dad and Mr. Hydorn actually build the deck in our backyard. But this was going to be a different challenge for me, and it would be for my dad as well. We worked hard on it, and there are a number of trials and errors. Neither of us had done this before, so it was a learning process. But we had finally had a final product, and it was nearly perfect. Then one day I came home to see that there were some cuts made into the block that didn't quite line up with what I had envisioned or what we had talked about. And I asked my mom if Dad had worked on it while I was gone, and the answer was apparently. He called me just after my mom must have given him an earful, and he apologized. He said he only wanted to help. We didn't have much time before the proposal was planned to be, so he wanted to step in and do what he could. I was frustrated. It took me a little bit to get over it, but that phone call helped a lot, and by the end of it, it made me appreciate it for what it was. And I appreciate it all the more now because I can look at that little project that we did together and it has a personal little signature for my dad. About a month after my wife and I were engaged, both of our families came together and celebrated us. To this day, it's one of the happiest memories that I have. Unfortunately, shortly after that was when Dad started to get sick. Started having chronic chest pains and issues breathing. After talking with a doctor in our family about his symptoms, my mom and Dad were told to rush to the ER. It wasn't good. Doctors had a lot of trouble at first nailing down what the issue was because it had spread so far and was so prevalent throughout his body, they couldn't find the source. But once they realized it was an infection within his blood. And it was spreading by the second, taking quick hold over his heart and his lungs. Within a week, Dad was moved down to the ICU at UC Medical, where we were told that he would be treated by the best of the best. Any doctor in UC was going to be well versed in whatever was plaguing my father. They took a number of measures to help my dad, and none of them really seemed to take hold. During this time, I was trying to do whatever I could to help my mom and dad. I had to step up to be the steady rock that my mom could cling on to whenever she was struggling. And my wife, who is a nurse, helped me tremendously. And we both stepped in to be advocates for my dad in the hospital, making sure that we understood what the situation was so that we could help talk Mom and Dad through it. Shortly after spending Thanksgiving in the hospital with my dad, he suffered from an event which resulted in the doctors needing to bring him back. After that, it was determined that Dad would need to be intubated in order to try to gain better control of whatever the situation was. I remember saying goodnight to him before he was put under. He looked at me and he said, "Take care of Mom for me while I'm asleep. I love you, and I'll see you on the other side." Those were the last words my father spoke to me before he went under. And 3 weeks later, after fighting to the very end, he passed. He never quit. He may have lost that battle, but he never, ever quit. That "I love you" will mean everything to me. Right to the moment where I myself go to sleep and can tell my father once again that I love him. My dad lost his father to cancer when he was a senior in college. And on my grandfather's deathbed, he looked to my dad and he said, "I love you." And that would be the very first and the very last time that he ever said it. I'm very thankful that my grandfather did that. Because of that one single "I love you," my dad vowed that he would tell his children that he loved them at least once a day. And he would go further to show them in his actions that he loved them even more frequently than that. He made a promise to himself that he would be the change that he wanted to see in the world. I remember growing up thinking that my dad was as strong as Superman and as smart as Einstein. And the older I got, the more I learned that maybe he wasn't as smart as Einstein, and he probably wasn't as strong as Superman. I learned that he wasn't the perfect man that I had thought he was. The more I learn this, the more I continue to learn about his faults, his errors, his fears, all that he could cover up with a demanding presence and a booming voice, the more I love him. I ask you, fathers and sons, just as much as you are him. Any lesson taught and passed from father to son holds great value. But a lesson and impact that slowly permeates and elicits change for the better, that's invaluable. I feel called to share my stories with my dad. The lessons he taught me, by lecture or by action. I want to share the story of my father's love and the impact that it had. I'm here to tell my father's story. A story of a man who was told by his own father that he loved him only once. So, because of that, my father made his decision to be that change in the world, to share his love, to tell his children, I love you, and to show them even more than he said it. However, my story is not mine alone. I was not my dad's first child. When my dad married my mom, she had 2 different children from her previous marriage, my brother and my sister, both of whom were craving a connection with a father figure and wanted someone who would love them unconditionally for all that they were. Someone who would say those 3 words to them. Dad was more than happy to be that father to them. He loved them as if they were his own because he made it that way. They were never his stepchildren. They were his son and daughter. He never saw it any other way. And when my sister was in high school, she was dating a young man whose father would soon pass from sepsis himself. This being the same thing that ended up taking my father. As soon as that happened, my mom and dad especially made sure that my future brother-in-law knew that he was loved and that he was part of our family. And once again, Dad filled in as a father. But going above and beyond all of this, my dad was a father not just to myself or to my siblings. In his nearly 40 years of serving LaSalle, Dad coached, counseled, and mentored thousands of young men. He loved each and every one of them as if they were his own. And not only would he tell these young men, he would show them every day in his actions. Most of those young men saw what my dad did, and they were very thankful for it. Others felt the impact within their hearts, and they continue to live on Dad's legacy every day. And I'm ever grateful to them for doing so. To the sons listening, love your father as he was divinely chosen for you. And to the fathers, love your sons and daughters, born to you or brought before you. They are a divine gift. Live out the message and the love of St. Joseph, who fathered a son not born of his blood, but whom he loved unconditionally all the same and raised as his own. If Mary was the divinely chosen mother of Jesus, then Joseph was certainly his divinely chosen earthly father. Love your son with the fervor and devotion that St. Joseph loved Jesus. Love him as if he were a direct gift from God, who has entrusted you with the care of his most precious creation. Love him that way because it's true. To be a man of God, to be a man of Christ, is to be a man of love. True and unconditional love. So be a man of love and be generous with it. This was the final lesson that my dad taught me. I want to carry on the legacy and the tradition that my father left before me. Not the tradition of athletic excellence, not the tradition of academic achievement, not a tradition of professional or financial prowess. I want to carry on his legacy of presence, his legacy of impact, and I want to carry on his legacy of love for his family and those around him. That's why I'm here with you today. So that I might walk a single step where my Father tread miles. I want you to do me a favor and picture something with me for a moment. See yourself standing at the edge of a lake. The waters are still and peaceful. Beneath your feet lay a bank of stones, each one unique, holding their own qualities and their own value. As you look down and pick up a stone, you notice your reflection in the waters and you pause. You take inventory of all the unique features and you recognize yourself. You continue to pick up a stone and you drop it in the water. It ripples your reflection for some time and the water stills again. You look up and you see the waters continuing to ripple far beyond what you can see, while your reflection still remains. You try to look to the depths of the waters to see which stone you dropped. You see it just behind your reflection, resting right at the bottom. You look at all the stones around you. You could continue to do this with every stone that you see, building a structure beneath your reflection that is just barely visible. While each and every stone sends ripples further and further out, it may only seem like it makes little difference to you. But to your reflection, and to the waters that show it, and to the foundation beneath, you have changed this lake far more than you can imagine. Each and every stone, each and every story, each and every lesson, and each and every I love you changes that reflection of you far beyond what you can imagine. Loving your son, loving that little reflection of you, starts with loving that reflection that you see in the mirror and in the still waters, the one inside of you. For better or worse, your son will reflect the habits and the actions that you present within yourself. So hold love in your heart, in your actions and in your words, in every stone that you drop in your lake, and your son will reflect the same. Make the decision to love and be generous with it. Love each other and let it radiate out into the world, so there may be a ripple felt by all around you. I implore you to approach the world with love and start in your home. Make it known to everyone whom you love that you do, and in doing so, inspire them to do the same. Drop your stone in the waters and watch its ripple carry out long after your stone disappears. Thank you.